Yeah, sounds good.
Hi everyone, so my name is Rohn Martin. I'm the founder and CEO of Sporting Global, and today we're having an exclusive interview with Rohn from SportsTechX. Hello Rohn, how are you?
Hey, well, Martin, I am good. How are you?
We're doing pretty well, thanks. And thank you for once again for being part of this interview. I
Yeah,
think
no
everyone is
worries.
very excited to hear more about your background, what you do at SportsTechX. So let's just jump right into it.
Sure. Yep.
So my first question is, can you tell me a bit about your academic and professional experience?
Studies. Yeah, you want to start with that? Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I did most of my schooling and education in India. Then I did a master's in sports management in Madrid with Real Madrid, Universidad Europea.
Yep.
But yeah, that's my schooling background. Like professionally, I've started my career with KPMG. I started as a management consultant.
Right.
I was doing like consulting for telecom operators out of Middle East and Africa. So I traveled to some weird locations, Rwanda and Swaziland, and I spent a lot of time in Dubai and South Africa. Like I was one of those guys where they said all these weird places to go, and I'd put my hand up and say,
Right.
"Yeah, go."
That's part
So I
of the
started with
experience, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, those are not the kind of places you would get a chance to visit. Like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah. No, for sure.
so I started with that. I was doing telecom consulting, and then I started my first startup in 2009. Yeah, since then there've been multiple startups, but I've been an entrepreneur ever since.
Very cool. Very cool. And now your venture has kind of like led you to SportsTechX, and you're currently the partner of SportsTechX. So
Yeah.
I think it would be great to know a little bit what is the company all about and how did it come to life?
Yeah, well, SportsTechX, what we look at is basically business intelligence for the world of sports technology.
Right.
As you know, and as we all know, sports is booming, and the business of sport is only growing. There's investment from so many new countries. There are so many new markets that are opening up. Advertiser money is pumping in from different places. So,
Yep.
as the business grows, technology will always follow. Where the money goes, technology will always find good solutions.
For
And
sure.
we found over the last few years that there was so much happening in sports tech. And so as SportsTechX, we realized that there is an opportunity to kind of cut through the noise and showcase all the cool startups, understand what's happening in the industry, who's investing in what markets are hot, what segments are hot, what was hot 2 years ago, is it still hot now, things like that. So our objective is to provide business intelligence on what's happening in sports tech. How the company came about? Well, as usual, as any good startup story will tell you, two guys met somewhere and they connected on something, and the same happened with Benjamin, who actually kind of started SportsTechX. He was writing these blogs and
Yep.
kind of putting out a bit of intelligence in 2017. And I came along and we started talking about what we wanted to do and how we were thinking of the industry. And we met in 2017. We connected actually online first
Okay.
through some common friends. We just knew
Right.
some people. Yeah, I was traveling in Berlin actually,
Okay.
and I had just sold my last startup, so I was taking some time off, and I was traveling in Berlin. And through somebody, I was at a party, and she was like, "Hey, you should talk to this guy if you're talking about
Right.
sports tech." And that guy was Benjamin, and we connected, and yeah, now we're running the show. Let's trying to build this company into something bigger.
There you go. And it just only proves the point of networking, right? And the importance of having connections.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'll just add, like when I came to Berlin, of course, my idea was to take some time off because I just finished my startup,
Right.
or I just sold that company. But I was doing a little bit of a Euro trip. I went to Barcelona, Berlin, a couple of other cities.
Yep.
But my agenda was very clear: to meet as many people, whoever I could get introduced to, talk to them about what I was doing, what I was planning on doing.
Yep.
And through those connections, you just never know, because even the woman I met at that party, I was introduced to her through someone else
Right.
who I met back in Bangalore. And you next thing you know, 2 years, 3 years later, we're talking about launching a product. So yeah, always to any listener, it's your network. I always say is not just the guys you hang out with for a beer on a Friday, but It's anybody you know, just reach out and talk to them. You'll be surprised how they'll help out.
And I think it's a good learning lessons too, though. It's kind of like how you know, proactively are focusing on building this, you know, connections and network. And of course, it's not like you have a hidden agenda around it. It's just like, you know, meet new people, you know, stimulate ideas, thoughts. And, you know, I was through the same thing when I was building Sporting Global. You know, you just talk with people and you get new ideas, new thought process, and it's what's going to help, you know. And you know, for you met Benjamin, and that was a perfect link, and here you are, you know. So it's amazing story.
Yeah, and I'll jump on one word you said over there, which is proactively.
Yeah.
I was very clear. Like when I first started on this journey, I actually made a list of people. Like there were 20 people, whoever like I could think of. I said, okay, these are the guys from my own network, through my LinkedIn, through my friends, whatever. I was like, okay, these are the guys who I know are connected to sport in some way.
Yeah.
And bang, bang, bang. I just made it. And you know, and you go from there. So the idea that you reaching out and then talking about it, the rest of it will follow. But even that is important. Yeah.
For sure. And you mentioned that obviously you've been part of the Real Madrid Universidad and you did your Master in Sports Studies there, MBA. And how has this program stimulated and contributed to the growth of SportsTechX?
Well, actually, so my background before I did that master's was in tech and entrepreneurship. Right. So I've started companies. There've been a couple. I've exited. I've raised funding. So I knew that process reasonably well. I mean, it's everybody's responsibility, but I had some idea. So yeah, I understood product a bit. I understood entrepreneurship a bit. But what I didn't have so much of a grounding is in the business of sport.
Right.
So I'm a fan. I'm a sports nerd. We love all the stats. We consume all the content. But there's a translation, and they said this a lot in the MBA. Is that when you start working in sport, you're not a sports fan anymore.
Right.
And that's important because you have to stop thinking like a fan and start thinking like a business executive or like any normal working professional. So that was an important transition for me to understand the dynamics of how the sport business went. There were specific topics that we covered which were completely new to me, like how does a sporting facility run? What are the dynamics of that? How do those events take place? How does the Champions League final get staged? What are the nuances of sports marketing, which is different from regular marketing? So it was more that. It was more fine tuning my understanding of the sports industry, the business of sports, how that works, and then adding my knowledge that I had a bit from before, and so that helps me shape. And that's on one side. The other thing I'll definitely add was the professors. Of course, that's a great network. In fact. So the professors, as well as my classmates, all of these are people who, my classmates are all going to be working, at least 80% of them are going to be working in sport for the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. Right. So that's an important network, but also the professors, because that's a great starting point. Somebody you can reach out to and need some help. And I've actually done that, a lot of that as well. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, and I would like to touch upon two things that you mentioned, and one of them obviously is you're not a fan anymore. You know, once you're entering into this industry, and I think a lot of people goes into this industry as a fan, and then they don't quite realize that you're not a fan anymore. You're a professional. You have to adapt according to these things. And obviously the second one, as you say, how do you utilize the network that is closest to you? You know, you're talking about your professors, your co-peers, like your students, and kind of like utilize them as a resource and helping you build your path and obviously help each other.
Yeah. I mean, one of the, like when SportsTechX was coming off the ground, one of my first hires was from my university. Like, I mean, we found good people to work with, and you know, collaborate with. So, I mean, you never know where you can go if you make good connections and good relations. Yeah.
So my next question is obviously is what do you feel has been, obviously we talked a little bit regarding your experience at the program, but what do you feel has been kind of like your key lessons from the university, and why would you recommend future sports students to apply for this program?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned a couple of points already. The network was huge. I'll tell you what I love, my favorite aspects of the program. I think that the Real Madrid name and also the way the program was structured, the access that we got was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I mean, this sounds like an advertisement for the program, but it really is not. What I loved was like, I mean, I got like, I can't even count the number of stadiums that we visited. We did a trip to New York, and in those 5 days, as part of the program, yeah, they take
Yeah,
you
yeah.
for a week to New York. As part of those 5 days, we went to Madison Square Garden. We went to the Red Bull Arena in New Jersey. We went to Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
We caught, like, I mean, you got access to some really, really top football, like sporting executives, not just
Right.
footballs. So you got, like, I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Huge eye opener to see how the sports industry works in America. We went to Brooklyn Center, the Barclays Center, sorry, in Brooklyn.
Right.
So we got access to a bunch of arenas, and the same in Spain. Obviously, the Bernabeu,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's of course. We went to the MotoGP circuit in Valencia.
Yeah.
We went to the Mestalla. I mean, getting
Right.
access to these kind of arenas firsthand and being there, watching the interactions of what happens behind the scenes,
Yeah.
that was huge for me. I
Yeah.
thought that was one of my favorite aspects of the program. I mean, apart from the professors and network and everything,
Sure.
because those are things that you wouldn't get. And I think Real Madrid is unique in that way.
Yeah.
I don't think there are too many programs that fly you to New York for a week and you're sitting down with executives from like City Football Group, because New York City FC
Right.
is run
Yeah,
by
yeah,
them.
yeah.
You know, so I mean, you have one-on-one access with these guys who are like the industry leaders in sports and in sports. So I found that amazing. Yeah, that's probably my biggest takeaway. What was the second half of the question?
Well, is why kind of like why should future sports students apply for this program? But I think you kind of like went into it, talking about obviously the networking, the opportunities, the just the facilitating that Real Madrid Universidad is doing,
And don't get me wrong. Also, to temper it, there are definitely things that I think that they can improve.
For sure.
Areas that, I mean, some of the coordination, the communication, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I would always say there's always going to be pros and cons. If you can
Yeah.
focus on what you want from it, as long as you are clear on what I'm looking for from this MBA, then you can go out and get it. And then the rest of it will keep happening.
And I think also one thing that you mentioned though that I didn't know for sure was that obviously the U.S. trip and just exploring something besides football, right? So which is kind of like you would expect from Real Madrid Universidad. It's very like football centric.
Yeah, no, I mean the US trip was just one of them. We did Vitoria, which is in the north of Spain, where that's one of the hubs. Baskonia is one of the best. I mean, one of the top basketball teams in Europe. We spent a lot of time with them.
Okay.
I already mentioned the MotoGP. I mentioned Valencia. Like they did a really good job, I think, of making sure. Like some of our professors were specialists in, in specific industries. So one of them was like a sponsorship guy from Formula One. One of them was like the guy who headed the Spartan races in Spain.
Yeah.
So different, like a really good mix of not just football. I think that's one thing that was very clear, that they did a good job of.
Right. But I think also that's really good for future students to know that it's like like you can go to, even if you're not like that into football, and like you just want to explore kind of like what options the sport industry has and what it facilitates. So it's I think it's really good. And my next question goes a little bit into more of your entrepreneurial background. And obviously, you're a serial entrepreneur. And what have been your key lessons from the startup world so far?
Wow. That could be a whole interview on its own. Let me sum it up. So I started my first one. I was pretty young. I think I was 24 at the time. My first startup, I had a good job at KPMG, and I was like, hey, I can mess around I'm still young, can mess around for a couple of years. And I jumped into the entrepreneurial boat. It was a great ride. We ran that company for 9 years. It was called Alma Mater. It was pretty simple. It was customized merchandise. So you come to our website and like DIY, design your own merch and pay for it online and get it shipped to you. So whether you want one piece or 1,000 pieces, we would cater for it. And it was an unstructured industry. In 2009, you have to understand the e-commerce boom was just coming to India. Amazon barely existed. eBay was just about entering the market. So e-commerce and cash on delivery and like all these concepts were just very, very new. Even the word entrepreneur itself was like what is that a bit?
For sure.
So yeah, we were in at the start, and that was a really interesting journey. A couple of rounds of funding later, and you realize that, wow, this is a machine, and suddenly you're running a company of some scale,
Yeah.
and you have salaries to pay on the 5th of every month, and next thing you know, you're like, oh, like, damn, there's a long weekend of holidays coming up, and you're the one like, oh shit, like why are there holidays? I need to do
Yeah.
work. Rather than when you were employed, you're like, oh, holiday weekend.
Right.
So there are small shifts like that.
Yeah.
But no, a couple of key lessons I would say, if I have to rank them, I would say number one, don't go alone. It's a really tough journey. I mean, if you can find good people, whether it's a equal co-founder or you have a different share or whatever it is, but there are
Right.
going to be days that you're going to be like, man, what the hell? I need help or whatever. And to have somebody there is important. Also, investors like that. I mean, those are different things.
For sure.
That's on one side. Your network. I've already spoken about it.
Yeah.
It's a super super crucial aspect. Most entrepreneurs I've met are like, hey, I don't want to talk about my startup. Somebody will steal the idea,
Right.
and they're like, I mean, more often than not, nobody has time to steal it,
Yeah.
and they might be thinking of something similar, and they might maybe jump in or they might add value.
Right.
Uh, there are a lot of things that you could gain by talking about it rather than lose.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and put yourself out there. Fail fast was one thing that I'd learned as well. I remember talking to an investor, and we were like almost like $1 million in revenue at the time.
Right.
And this was after about 3, 4 years of running it. And he was like, okay, so you failed, but you've taken too long. And I was like, whoa, like we're kind of at this revenue figure and we think that we're doing really well, but to him that like we had been failing or we hadn't grown fast enough. So
Right.
that perspective is important.
Yeah.
So, you need to, whatever you need to do, try to be as quick about it as possible, learn and react and adapt better to your markets.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are, yeah, fail hard, fail fast is another one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's really good advice. And what, like, obviously, I think we touched upon like some of it, but like, what lessons have you brought with you to the sport industry from your other adventures with Alma Mater Store and
Yeah.
KPM, among others?
Yeah, that's also interesting because I saw like some of the things that I saw in sports or whatever my limited exposure so far is that I think sports is a very tight community,
Yeah.
or because it's still a growing industry that everybody kind of knows each other. Whenever you go to events, you see the same faces and things like that. So that's an interesting dynamic to enter into.
Yeah.
And for me, so you try to make those relationships, but also try to expand that a bit and make sure that more people see you. Again, coming back to network, that's an important thing. So that's an important understanding that I had about sports business. Speed of innovation, I would say. We're just used to, as entrepreneurs, moving faster things, but sports teams and clients they still
Yeah. Yeah.
use traditional businesses and they like to take their time. Things are changing, of course.
Right.
I mean, with the huge commercial opportunities, sports businesses like teams are getting like huge, big commercial departments. They're trying to run like closer to businesses.
Yeah.
I would say. I mean, we always go back to football, but in Europe, Juventus is a great example
Yeah.
of leading the way in Italy. And like Italian football 5 years ago was nowhere.
Right.
But yeah, Juventus has really taken steps to professionalize themselves, their branding, their logo, their image. And now you can see other teams following with AC and Inter
Yeah.
getting investors and things like that. So I think that change is happening, but also an understanding that you have to be patient in this industry a bit more than maybe others.
Yeah. And obviously, as a tech guy, and it kind of like popped in my mind, and it just we touched upon like obviously you went into the Italian league, and one of the things that like I feel is quite interesting is how teams now are utilizing social media. And I don't know if you're familiar with Roma's admin on Twitter and all the stuff that person is doing, and there's a lot of different things in there, how how they're kind of like, every post that that person is doing, I didn't even know who it is, but that person is doing something interesting, something new, something different, and everybody's like, give that person a raise, because it's so innovative, so fancy, and
Okay.
and like, how do you see like sports teams utilizing technology and innovation and social media in order to push their assets a little bit further than just what they do?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because from what we've seen and all my interactions with sports teams, their priority is fan engagement.
Right.
Want to connect to every fan. What sports teams like Real Madrid is a good example.
Yep.
Real Madrid, because I have like a reasonable amount of data on that. So
Yep.
out of Real Madrid has about 650 million fans globally, is what they claim.
Right.
3% of those are in Spain. 3%.
Wow.
In Spain, not even Madrid. Now you're talking about how many people walk through that stadium every year. 200, 300, 400,000. I mean, the Bernabeu is a beautiful stadium, but 70% of it is season tickets as well.
Right.
So the tickets left over for rest of the crowd is not that many.
Yeah.
You're talking about, there are about, even if you say 500,000, that's 500,000 that they have. They have 100,000, 90 something thousand socios.
Yeah.
That's 649 million plus people that they're trying to connect to that they don't know. Now they'll say they have another 20 million on their social media channels. Okay, so reduce that, but that's still over 600 million people. Or they have, I think, sorry, not 20, it's about 200 million people on their social media channels.
Yeah.
Across. But that's 400 people that they don't know, 400 million people, sorry. So the club's agenda is to try and reach all these people. Now, how they're reaching them is through technology, through social media. They're trying to expand their social media reach. They're trying to get into different countries. You'll find, in fact, through this data, while I was going through or talking to them, that I think Philippines is one of their biggest markets, which would have been, similarly, Malaysia is a huge market for Liverpool in the countries. Like, it's just abnormal that if you go to the Philippines, I think it's 8 out of 10 football fans are Real Madrid fans.
Wow.
And the same from Liverpool and Malaysia. And so you come across these weird statistics,
right,
through data analysis or through data tracking and that engagement. So that's on one side. They're really trying to find technology to connect with fans better. That's a huge agenda for them.
Yeah.
And why? Because they want to monetize, they want to identify fans, give better experiences, all of that. That's on one side. The other side that they use a lot of these channels is for content creation and distribution. Like a big thing, again, coming back to the fan, is how, like, what new can we present? You're seeing a lot of them have Netflix series. Formula One came out with one last year. Juventus again did. A bunch of sports teams are producing content. They're creating content on other platforms, on their platforms. You're seeing a lot more of the training and preseason footage. All of that content is just it's all for the fans, and it's all through the social media channels. So that's on the one side where they're looking to monetize.
Right.
On the other side, of course, technology is, and as this has been there for a while, but now it's getting better. It's more on the performance and analytics and player performance and how we can get more out of the player and data and strategy and scouting and all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how we also as SportsTechX kind of understand the sports tech landscape. So there's one side which is performance and performance tech, which is all about the athlete, the player, the team, how they're getting better. And the other side is management and management and organization, which is about what are the tools that the team is using, their softwares, their stadium tech, how they're developing their stadium, things like that.
Yeah.
And the third is the fan and how they're engaging with and connecting with the fan and fantasy sports and betting and all of that stuff. So that's how we kind of segment it. And all these three areas have huge technology plays.
Yeah, and there's no doubt, like, to wrap up this question though, there's no doubt that sports tech, it's booming. There's a lot of needs for it, and it will be, either more important going in the future for teams, sports organizations, and brands.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, sponsorship tracking, all of it. Everybody is using, like, tech is here. It's here. Data analysis is here. It's not going anywhere.
For sure. So another question is, again, going back to SportsTechX, and like, I think we just touched upon how will SportsTechX impact the sports tech industry?
And so what we're trying to do and what we hope to be, like really good at, is identifying really good innovative solutions and showcasing them.
Right.
So somebody who's doing something cool, innovative, like you guys, I mean, trying to find, there aren't too many job portals for sports right now. So, I mean, that there's a clear need, and there's a need for you to be showcased as well, of making sure that as many people know about
For
you.
sure.
Yeah, what we've managed to do through our reports is kind of position ourselves as some intelligence. If anybody would like to take a look at them, you can go to our website. They're free to download. We've never charged for any of our content. That's how we think.
Yep.
So we put out these big reports about Europe and North America, which was an overview of sports tech in these geographies, in London as well. And the idea was to talk to some real, like, sports tech disruptors or leaders in the space.
Yep.
Showcase some really cool startups, like who's doing something innovative.
Right.
And not just the highest funding guys, not just talk about, like, I don't know, FanDuel or whoever, and DraftKings, who've raised like 300 and 500 and $1 billion, but like the small company who's still unfunded, but they're doing some cool stuff.
Right.
So to get a mix of all of that, and also then talk about data, like what funding data, where are the startups coming from, which are the big hubs.
Yep.
And that's important for any reader as well, because that will give you an idea of which markets are important. So, like, for example, the big sports tech hubs in Europe certainly are London, is far and away number one. Berlin, Paris, and Barcelona are the big markets. The Nordics as a whole is definitely interesting. Stockholm is a big hub over there. But these are the four primary cities. So if you're looking for opportunities, if you want to be in this industry, then maybe startups in these areas, that's where you should be looking. Because that's where investors are going, that's where startup founders go, that's where a lot of big events happen.
Yep.
Things like that. So what we try to do is put all this information out there. Like we have lists and lists of sports accelerators. What are the top events that go on? So we try to put as much information about the sports tech industry in front of people. And then as a result, be the place where people are coming to look for innovative stuff.
Yep.
And then be able to showcase startups and say, hey, like, investors, if you want, like, the cool guy who's doing really cool stadium tech solutions in California, or who's doing really cool fan engagement solutions in Southeast Asia, then come to us and we have the access to all this data. So that's what we're trying to do, be a platform. Yeah.
I think it's amazing, and I think also, like, it could be like a great resource for students, within the field of sports, to learn more about the industry, the landscape, what is happening, and understand more of the, the future trends. And I think that will help them a lot in dictating, what areas they should explore. As you also mentioned, what markets maybe they should approach, and also be, thinking outside the box, and maybe even start their own venture. Who knows?
Absolutely. That's such a good point. And which is why we've always had one version of it for free.
Right.
I mean, that's from day one, we've thought about it, that we want to promote the ecosystem as a whole. And for students, for people like young entrepreneurs, for, young executives who are trying to find a way, they at least have a resource where they can go find some information.
For sure.
If you need more information, if you're, I don't know, a sports team or an investor and you need the next level, sure, you come in and pay and you get that. Yeah. But at least there's a level available for you for free.
Right. So it's a good benchmark, and then obviously you can dictate, how far you want to go with it. But I really think that's a really nice asset, and I think that will help a lot for the young students, at least, which is what we think a lot about.
Perfect. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think, like, my one of my final questions is, and goes back more into the entrepreneur side again. So what tip do you have for early founders and startups to create a solid value proposition?
I mean, I can't tell you what industry or what segments are hard. Maybe we can talk about a couple of those.
Yeah.
But I'd rather, instead of that, I'd focus on, like I said, the problem solution dichotomy is the big one. They're all entrepreneurs try to solve. Like, hey, there's a solution, or is there a problem? First of all, what is the problem, and then what is my solution, and then that's my solution for this problem. Is the problem big enough for it to actually deserve a solution? Otherwise you're being a solutionist. You might need something to just open a cap of a bottle, where nobody really has a problem. I mean, it's a problem, but
Yeah.
require tech to do this.
For sure.
So those are the couple of processes that you need to go through. Usually I find, if you're trying to start a company, those companies usually don't go too well. If
Right.
the problem comes to you naturally, or you've been part of it, or you've seen it, or you feel it, and then you're like, hey, I wish this existed. You're like,
Right.
hey, like create it. Like that organic process usually tends to be more successful. I found in my experience. That's one thing. So let the problem come to you. We've talked about a
Yeah,
couple of things: find a good co-founder, network people, all of that.
for sure.
In terms of segments, or industries to focus on, yeah, I've mentioned that as well. Like fans and fan engagement is a huge play.
Right.
A lot of sports teams are spending money on content, on connecting with fans, on fan data. How do they capture and aggregate and manage fan data? That's an important thing
Yeah.
for them as well. So there are a few areas which are emerging. We haven't even spoken about esports.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Huge whole other word. That's like a
That's
big,
a different market on its own,
yeah. And then people always ask me, or we get into this debate of, is it sport, is it not sport?
Right.
I feel like if you're talking about that, then you've missed the point in time.
Yeah.
Esports is here, and it's here to stay. Now the only job is in what's happening right now, which is a really interesting parallel, is
Right.
that sports teams are connecting to younger audiences through esports.
Yep.
We're seeing this happen all the time. EA Sports has long-term partnerships with the Premier League, with I think 5 or 6 major leagues.
Yep.
Formula One is trying to connect through gaming with younger audiences. So that is happening because younger audiences are all playing, are
For
all
sure.
on their consoles. But at the same time, esports is also trying to learn from traditional sports a bit about how to like gain fan loyalty,
Yep.
how to engage, like how to provide an amazing stadium experience.
Yep.
How do I make this person a lifelong fan so that when they grow up and have kids, their kids are also fans?
Yeah.
Like sports has done an amazing job of creating that kind of cult mentality in
Right.
people. This is mine. It's a part of me. So I mean, there's a lot of synergies between both sides,
Yep.
from technology, from fan experience, from all of that. So I think that's an interesting place to be as well. Yeah, just a couple of things.
And to tap into that too, like from our side at least, what we see and like what I learned during my like time in the US was how like with esports you reach a completely different market for your teams, right? Which maybe naturally wouldn't be your fans in the first place, and suddenly because of the gaming experience and how it ties in, then suddenly they reach out to an entire different market,
Yeah.
which also benefits the teams and how they think about sponsorships, how they think about value creation for their fans. But it's also a different angle for them on how are we attracting fans, and what is their experiences, and how does it separates from like the traditional viewer of a game and then a FIFA game maybe.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like synergies, as you said, but there's also a lot of lessons to be learned on how you manage their fans, because I feel like also they have different needs in terms
Yep.
of their approach. You can't probably treat like original football fan with a FIFA fan and vice versa. So there are some synergies, but also some challenges that they have to discover, which also makes this industry so attractive. But as you said, there's no doubt that the esports is staying. It's here to be, and if you want to learn more about it, you should dive into it. And as any future students in sports, you should check it out just because
Yeah.
it's great.
No,
Just to
for
learn,
sure.
just to learn.
Yeah, for sure. Even if maybe it's not your industry and maybe that's not what you work in,
Yeah.
you should know enough about. You should have some basic knowledge, because when you come to sponsors, a sponsor is might ask you a question. Hey, why shouldn't I sponsor that esports team, and why should I invest in your team or your initiative? And you have to be able to counter that, or know enough about esports to answer
Yeah.
that question. So some working knowledge of the industry is imperative.
Understand your market, right?
Yeah, understand the sports market, and it's part of sports now. Like that, like I said, that debate of is it or is it not, that's a waste of time, man. Just get it, accept it, and move on.
And my final question, and well, thank you, of course, for the time and your great answer. It's been a good dialogue. And my final question is, do you have any final advice for any upcoming sports entrepreneurs?
Whew. I would say, well, I mean, apart from regular advice, be patient and run fast and this and that, I would say understand, like, it's a crowded market. There's a lot happening.
Right.
There's a lot happening in fitness. We haven't even talked about that. Fitness and workout is another huge space, from devices and equipment to actual applications. So there's a lot happening in the space. It's a good time to be in sports. I mean, I think both of us made that choice maybe a couple of years ago that we jumped in. So it's a good time to jump in, for sure. If you want to make a career in sports, this is a good time to enter. In fact, maybe even a year late, I'll say. So jump in now.
Yeah.
But really spend that time to understand, like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, then really understand the problem that you're solving. Focus on that. Don't chase the money. Like, funding is never an objective. It's only a means to an end.
Right.
Funding can only ever accelerate your growth.
Right.
If you need money to achieve what you can achieve in 3 years, you want to do it in 1 year, then maybe funding can help. But if you don't really know who the client is, who the fan is, what you're doing, no amount of money will help you solve that problem.
Yeah.
Funding is never a goal. That also, I always say, like, because that's the first thing. You have a startup, I want to meet an investor.
Right.
You know, you really ask yourself, do you really need an investor or do you need a client?
Yeah.
Because if you're a client, they're also paying you and you're keeping your equity. So maybe that's things like that. There are a couple of things that I'd like to focus on, but yeah, just jump in, take a punt, spend a year, 2 years, mess around, make some mistakes, but do them quickly. Yeah,
I agree. It's a great learning experience regardless. And try to, as you said, I think is a really good advice too, because I think a lot of the entrepreneurs today, obviously I can't talk for everyone, but I feel like, they focus so much on being an entrepreneur, then maybe not listening to, like, what is the problem, and discovering the problem and understanding the market. And then maybe it's not a problem after all, or maybe it's a different problem than you thought it was. And so I think that, like, as you said, be a little bit smarter in your entrepreneurial road, and of course, sports tech, sports entrepreneurship, there's a lot of opportunities. So definitely, like, we're an example. SportsTechX is an example of utilizing a market need and something that is happening in the industry now, and adapting to the trends of the industry. So it will be exciting to see where obviously SportsTechX is going in the future. And Rohn, I would like to thank you for the time. And to all our listeners, we always finish with "Vi snakkes."
Vi snakkes, what does that mean?
It's a Norwegian word for, like, see you later.
Perfect. Vi snakkes. Ole Martin, thanks so much for having me, man. Hope it was really good fun.
It was amazing. Thank you.